Hi everyone, it's Arda. Today I thought I'd talk a little bit about layering dies. Even before I joined the Birch Press design team, I had a number of them. I love the precise, intricate, dimensional look they give and the versatility they have. They're definitely an investment though, so I wanted to show you a number of ways you can use them so that you get your money's worth. First, it's important to choose a set that you love. For this video, I chose the Epiphany set, and here are the 3 cover plate dies that come in the set. Yes, this set has 3 cover plate dies, and I think that if you check out prices of other cover plates, you'll see that they're competitive. When you run them through your die cutting machine, you can decide whether you need to use a metal shim or not to ensure you get a clean cut. If you don't have a metal shim, running your sandwich through a few times usually does the trick. And whenever you're working with dies with lots of little pieces like these, whether they're layering dies or not, the roller brush end of this Spellbinders tool-in-one is a great way to quickly and easily release everything. Then the pokey end helps to get out the frames. Here are all 3 of the cover plates cut out from white cardstock. This is 80-pound Neenah, and I didn't use my metal shim, but I did run the top layer through twice. And now you can see why I chose this Epiphany set. There are 3 card fronts here, but each layer has 3 separate pieces, so in effect you have 9 dies which can be stacked together or not. There's a centerpiece, which in the case of Epiphany has a floral look with a clean frame around it. Then there's a circular piece which immediately calls a wreath to mind, but could also be used as a rainbow. And then of course there are the 3 outside pieces which stack perfectly together to create that unique layered look, but can also be used separately. One of the things to consider when you're using these intricate dies is adhesive. Generally, I would say your main choices are either liquid glue or an adhesive sheet. I like to use an adhesive sheet on the top die cut just because those lines are so very thin that it's hard to apply liquid glue without it squishing everywhere. Of course, the other side is that you lose that wiggle room that a liquid adhesive can give you for adjustments, so I use liquid glue for the other 2 layers. Another nice thing about the adhesive sheet is that it helps control the pieces. In this case, the die didn't cut through the adhesive sheet itself, and most of the pieces are in place. I'll just set this aside while I work on the other layers. Even in just one color, plain white, there are a number of looks you can get. And now imagine if you start adding color. Here's a previous card I made where I added color to the middle layer of a portion of the Lumina die. And you can easily change the look by changing where you add the color. Let's explore this. For my middle layer, I started with a piece of blue cardstock and I blended some darker blue and purple inks toward the center to give a gradient look to this layer. And here I can show you that even if you don't have that brush tool, the pieces are still easy to work with, and a pokey tool will work just as well, just maybe not as quickly. Now here I've already adhered the bottom layer of the outside piece to a card front, and I'll say right up front that generally if I want to use just one layer of the die, it will either be the top or the middle layer. I find that the smallest holes on the bottom layer are just not as pretty or as interesting on their own, although they do play an important role as the base when you stack them up. But here, in white on white, I think it gives a lovely hint of texture and interest on an otherwise plain background. And whether you use the outside piece on its own, or you add in the more central bits, the result is very clean and elegant. And here's another look, this time with just the middle layer, which I had added color to. Simply placing it onto a white card base makes a beautiful card. Or what about adding some drama with a black circle? This time I used the bottom layer of the wreath as well as the middle, and the contrast of the black and white really makes these colors pop. So as you can see, I played around with various combinations of pieces and layers to see what look I wanted on my cards. I went back and added the blue layer to the white card base and then the top white layer. You can see that I'm taking care to get it exactly where I want it because that adhesive sheet will be less forgiving than liquid glue. Next, I added the white top layer to the wreath as well. I want you to get a view of how it looks to use all the layers of all the pieces as a card front. It's very beautiful and ornate, and it only requires a simple sentiment to finish it off. But I'm thinking I would prefer to get more than one card out of this, so I kept playing around with the 2 centerpieces and I hit on an idea. By using my snippy scissors, I was able to cut the frame off from the center flower circle to get yet another look. I used glue only in the center and I curved up the petals to create some dimension. I added the layered Sugar Script Hello sentiment die to the card, along with some silver jewels, and that's my first card. For the second card, I added that black circle to the layered up wreath, and the same Hello sentiment, but I reversed the layers. This card has a more dramatic, intense look. You can add color to any or all of the layers. You can use glitter or mirror cardstock. Just simply cutting these dies and playing around with the pieces and layers gives you a ton of possibilities. The next technique is another one I did recently for this rainbow card. This time I'm using a partial rainbow and all 3 pieces of each layer. Now this part is a little counterintuitive, but it's important from both a color and ease of use point of view. You start with the top skinniest layer. I've created stencils by die cutting the 3 layers from white cardstock, and I've used pixie spray on the back to help hold them in place while I blend my inks. I worked my way from yellow through orange and pink and purple, going in a diagonal motion using some blending brushes. I want bold color here, but I'm not going full throttle, as my friend Laura Basson would say. At least not yet. You could stop right here. This is a pretty tone-on-tone look, and another way to use one layer of the set. But it's so satisfying to peel that stencil back and see those crisp white lines, isn't it? And also, the stencil itself is very pretty, which is exactly what we're going for. For the next layer of inking, I carefully placed the middle layers of all 3 pieces on top of the blended panel. It's so easy to see where it needs to go because I used the skinniest layer first. Now this time I am going full throttle with these inks. I used a heavy hand and a lot of ink because I want a lot of definition between the 2 layers, which will give a really cool look of depth. And then it's time for the final layer with the bottom layer of stencils. This time I changed the colors for some more contrast. Yellow went to orange, orange went to dark orange, pink went to purple, and purple went to dark purple. I just wanted to show you that I was very careful with that orange to purple transition. I worked my orange down to the purple and the purple up to the orange without a lot of overlap, but the pink that's underneath will help with the blend. Wait until you see this. Right? Look at all that dimension. Even watching it now, I feel like if I touched it, there would be ridges in it. To finish this, I simply trimmed it down and glued it onto a white card base, along with a black sentiment. I offset the sentiment to the right a bit to try and balance all that darkness of the ink blending in the bottom left corner. With a couple of circle dies, you could cut this into pieces and get more than one card too if you wanted to. But let's move on to what I'll do with those inked up stencil pieces. Here's what I did with them in a previous video. See how I turned the flower petals so that the colors didn't line up? This was probably one of my best and easiest brainwaves. Such a simple step that added so much interest. I wanted to see how it would work this time. So I started with the 3 layers of the wreath portion and I turned them before gluing them together. I think that the rainbow was actually more effective, but even with this more limited color palette, it's very pretty. For a change, I chopped the wreath in half, and this is what gave me the idea that you could create rainbows with this die too. Next, I wanted to explore using even more black. These colors really pop on black. And here's how the middle layer compares to the more delicate top layer. You can change the look here too. And here's another way to change the look. I used the middle layer, but I trimmed it down to make a square card. To do this, you need to make sure you trim off the frame portion on all 4 sides, but it allows you to make a card that is square rather than always an A2 size. I have more pieces left and I could keep going, but I have one more idea I want to show you that's a completely different look. This time I'm going to focus on the top layer of just that centerpiece to create a stained glass look, and I used a circle of black cardstock taped to the back of the die so that I'm not wasting a whole panel of cardstock just to get that one piece. This gives me the frame. Next, I cut it again with a scrap of white cardstock, and I carefully left that in the die. Using a trick I recently saw Jennifer McGuire use, I put a couple of pieces of purple tape behind the pieces I want, and I lifted them out of the die. The tape picked up a couple of extra pieces, so I just moved them off, just so that I have the pieces I want to color. I left them on the purple tape and I started coloring, but I found it annoying having my fingers sticking to the tape all the time. So eventually I got smart and I taped the tape down while I finished the coloring. I had hoped that I could use the purple tape as the backer for my inlaid die cutting, but the pieces had shifted a bit, so I went back to my normal method. I cut a panel of black cardstock and I cut a matching size circle out of the center. I laid down lots of adhesive on the white card base, I put the panel in place and then the frame as well. Then I inlaid all the colorful pieces, and I inlaid some white pieces as well for some breathing space. I felt like this card couldn't support that big hello sentiment, so I turned to the You Are Awesome stamp set, and I heat embossed Thinking of You in white. So which one's your favorite? I've stopped here, but I've got a lot more ideas, so you may see another video in the future outlining some more ways you can use them. I hope you enjoyed watching. Thanks so much for stopping by. See you next time.